Today's video is a short promotional video for local green vegetables, and we're going to be looking at some specific examples of ones that are available here in Uganda. But generally they tend to be very drought tolerant, tolerant of different weather conditions in comparison with imported exotic vegetables like collard greens and cabbage. And they also tend to be higher in nutrients compared to those vegetables. So in particular, vitamins A, B, and C, iron, calcium, zinc, and also often higher in protein. And so they're a good source of those nutrients and very important to add to a varied diet. And so we'll look at some specific examples. I'll look at them more closely, but they're things like cowpea leaves, pumpkin leaves, amaranth, cassava leaves, and more. So we'll look at them more closely in a minute. But all of these vegetables, they're very nutritious, and there are some tips that help with cooking them. One of them is to add a little bit of cooking oil or peanut paste or Simpson paste to them when you cook it, because the oil helps your body to absorb the vitamin A that's in the greens. It's also helpful to add a little bit of lemon juice, because the lemon juice makes the iron in the greens more available to your body. It's also good to use as little water as possible when you're cooking them, because some of the nutrients come out in the water, and if you pour off the water, you're losing those nutrients instead of actually ingesting them into your body. So try to use a small amount of water if possible. It's also good to try to cook them for as short amount of time as you need to, with the exception of cassava. Cassava has some cyanide components in it, and so you need to cook it for a longer time, at least 15 minutes. But the other greens, try to cook them for a shorter amount of time so that you lose less of the nutrients. Also, try to cook them as soon as possible after you've harvested them, and try to avoid drying them in the sun, because that breaks down some of the nutrients that are in the leaves. And so the best option is to harvest them right away and then go cook them so that you get the most out of them. So we're going to come and look up close at some of these vegetables so that you can see what they look like, and I'll tell you some important things about some of them. So here's a closer up look at some of these greens. First we have cassava leaves. Remember that cassava leaves need to be cooked for a longer amount of time to make them safe to eat because of the cyanide compounds in them. But they're especially high in protein, which is useful because the tubers of cassava have pretty much no protein in them at all. So you can get protein from the leaves, which you can't get from the tubers. They're also high in vitamin C. Then here we have spider flower, and this one is high in calcium, and it's also rather bitter, but very nutritious. And this one is edible nightshade. I have two varieties here. You can see they have different types of leaves. You have to make sure that you have the true edible nightshade, because some of them are toxic, but if you're in a place where people are growing it anyway, you can make sure to get the seeds from them. And we have sweet potato leaves. Sweet potato leaves are also high in calcium, and they are edible, unlike the leaves of Irish potatoes, which are not edible. But sweet potato leaves, very nutritious. Then here we have a local vegetable called malakwang, and it's related to hibiscus, and the leaves are sour, but very nice and nutritious. Then we have this one. This one is called jute mallow. There are different varieties of it, and this is just one, but they have kind of like some little hairs almost on the base of their leaves, and they all have that same kind of shape. And this one is especially high in vitamin C, and in fact if you eat an equivalent amount of oranges as you do to this one has 10 times the amount of vitamin C compared to the same amount of oranges. So that's pretty amazing. Then we have cowpea leaves here. Cowpea leaves are also a good source of calcium, and I'm telling you the things that they're especially high in compared to the other greens, but generally all of these are good sources of those vitamins that I mentioned, and calcium and iron and zinc. Then we have pumpkin leaves, and I'm told that the pumpkin leaves with these white lines are the best ones for eating, but you can eat any of the kinds of leaves of pumpkins. Then we have amaranth, and there are lots of different varieties of amaranth. Their leaves are all edible, and it's particularly high in iron compared to other greens that we have here. I'm going to show you one other one, but it's in my garden and it's still small, so I didn't want to chop off any of the leaves yet. But these are some of the examples of nutritious greens that you can get here in Uganda. Okay, this vegetable is called Malabar spinach, and there are some different varieties. This one has a red stem. There are also types that have a green stem, and they climb and get quite big. They're really common in higher elevation Kenya, where I lived at one time, and they're also nutritious and have a lot of kind of slimy compounds in their leaves, so that when you cook them they're a little bit slimy, but it's a lot like spinach in texture, and if you're okay with a little bit of sliminess, very nice addition to your meal. Might as well add a couple more. This one, okra. You can eat the leaves of okra as well as the fruits. Just for good measure, here is the last one. This one is lob lob, and here's how the seeds and flowers look so that you can recognize it. These leaves are also edible and nutritious. You can prepare them the same way that you prepare cowpea leaves. So that's the last one for today. Local greens, very nutritious. Add them to your diet. If you're interested in learning more about some local African vegetables, this is a really great book, and it's got some charts in it with specific amounts of the different nutrients that many other different greens have that I didn't include in my video.